Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we are so glad to have you here. Coming up on today's show, we are diving into an important conversation about second chances, survival, and justice. This April, the New Jersey Reentry Corporation will host its 2025 Annual Reentry Conference, a Journey of Deliverance, focusing on domestic violence, sexual abuse, and human trafficking. It's going to be held on Holy Thursday, April 17th. This conference brings together experts and survivors to shine a light on the trauma so many face and the path towards healing and justice. Joining me to talk about this powerful event are two key voices leading the effort. Former New Jersey Governor Jim McGreevey, who is chairman of the New Jersey Reentry Corporation, the NJRC, and Beth Adubato, associate professor of criminal justice at St. Peter's University and a featured speaker. Governor, Beth, welcome to you both. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
Thanks. Great to be with you, Laura.
Absolutely. So, Governor, you know, we always like to talk about politics and campaigns. We know you're running for mayor of Jersey City. We're not talking about that today.
Yes.
We're not talking about that today.
That's a good thing.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about your affiliation with the New Jersey Reentry Corporation, how you got involved, and then on to a little bit about this upcoming event.
I'll just give the quick narrative. Literally, I was in seminary, and the dean of the seminary sent me up to Harlem to Exodus Transitional Ministry and said, maybe you want to do this. And I just began to realize that these are men and women that, you know, may not have had the opportunities I did. Went to prison and now looking for that second chance, or yearning for that second chance. And what are the skills, what are the essentials to help make that a reality? But the conference that's coming up on April 17th is focused almost exclusively on women. And that is, you know, domestic violence, sexual abuse, and human trafficking, because traditionally, not always, but it is the women in the relationship that are victimized traditionally by a man. And after abuse over a protracted, prolonged period of time, at some point, candidly, when the man sometimes will take action against her physically and her children, once again, she reacts violently. And that's when a crime will occur. But the challenge is also often the whole history of prolonged abuse that happened before that one incident isn't told. And that's the challenge.
Right, right. Beth, let's talk a little bit about how you got involved with the organization. You and I know each other from some reporting days
Yes,
going back a few years. So let's talk a little bit about how you got involved.
So I am a criminology professor, obviously, and I do my research in all kinds of gender areas. So my dissertation was on domestic violence and sports, actually. But I am also a survivor of sexual assault, and I was a sexual assault advocate in Essex County. So a lot of different things brought me to this. So when someone is called in, one of the advocates is called in, we used to bring clothing and toiletries to the person who was in the hospital. And then I started working with women who were coming out of prison, and they were in a halfway house. And I used to bring them little gifts, things that they couldn't afford. And I started to realize we all have a lot of stuff. When my daughter left for college, we had so many different cosmetics. I had to get bins and sort them out. And I thought, this is so unequal. Now, think about this. You're coming out of prison, and as we just talked about, there's no separation here for women. They were mostly victimized before they got into prison. They were mostly victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. So they're coming out, they don't have anything, they're living in a halfway house or a shelter. So we started providing them for the things that they need, because then they have to get employment when they get out, or they're in violation of their parole. So all of this came together in this organization. And then I contacted Governor McGreevey and I said, I want to talk to you. I want a seat at the table. And he said, what table? And I said, I don't know, so maybe you can help me. So I'm really very appreciative to him that he's going to be highlighting our organization at this conference.
And this is so important, if I can jump in and sort of build on what Beth said, because so many women, Ed and Mahan Correctional Center in New Jersey, these are women, Laura. If you look at the stats, particularly the first offenders, they may be first offended for a felony assault, an aggravated assault, or homicide, But overwhelmingly, the first offenders, over 70% of the first offenders are engaged or committed the crime against somebody with whom they were in a personal relationship. And so the challenge for all of us is to understand that act of violence did not happen as an isolated incident. And when you look at these cases, and I used to prosecute when I was a young assistant prosecutor, I was in Special Victims Unit. But the reality is, for the woman who's responding to the violence against traditionally men, that she's been a victim over a prolonged period of time. And so to go to Beth's point is, not only is she at a disadvantage in terms of where does she go physically to leave that trauma, but so often she doesn't have an opportunity, so that the woman is stuck in the place of trauma, trying to protect herself, trying to protect her children. And then when it becomes indefensible, she responds. And ironically, she may never have called the police for a domestic incident. And so there's not that chronology. There aren't the police reports. And so when the judge or the court looks at the case, they see a crime, but they don't see the legacy of violence that was perpetuated upon that woman prior to her act of violence.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about how prevalent this is? And really, it doesn't matter what type of a background you come from, especially, when women are in an abusive relationship, you don't see it. They're very good at hiding it. They're managing things, but, people get pushed to a point. And again, as a reporter, whenever I'm covering a story, I try and look at something as, not what did they do, but what happened to them to make them react a certain way. Governor, can you talk a little bit about that?
And I think as Beth used the word trauma, because so many of these women have suffered trauma, and whether it's confronting sexual abuse, whether it's confronting addiction, whether it's confronting homelessness, there are, if you will, several factors that make leaving the home not an impossibility, but if you try to understand the place of that individual woman, she doesn't have it, and particularly if she has children, so that you're concerned, that there are very few shelters in New Jersey or in central and northern Jersey that will accept children. And so a mother wants to protect her children. She wants to make sure she's continued to be a part of the children's lives. And if she was an individual, perhaps she can leave. But ironically, the children who are themselves vulnerable to that abuse is the reason for her reasoning in certain circumstances to stay in a difficult circumstance.
Can I ask you, and either of you can chime in on this, where's the breakdown happening in protecting a woman? She might be afraid to leave because she's going to lose custody of her children, or, again, you can't go to a shelter, or somebody, well, here's an 800 number, here, go get this for resources, when, somebody is in the middle of a crisis and trying to make sure their children are staying in school or they're getting the food, because you don't know what is going on behind closed doors. Where's the breakdown happening when it comes to the support to prevent situations like this? I'm not sure. Beth, would you like to take
Sure. So let's just say in the last year, our little St. Peter's chapter of the Linda Org has helped 7 different particular families. All of these women had to leave in the middle of the night with just the clothes on their backs, and they all happen to have children. So by the time we hear about them, the state has gotten them an apartment. Now this is one of the problems, because most of the unmet needs, as we call them, the unmet needs will come under the category of shelter, permanent or temporary shelter. So these women have nothing. I had a young woman who had to leave. She was 21. She had a 3-year-old, and she just was afraid for the child's life and had an apartment. I'm not going to say where it is, but when we came there just to bring some initial donations, there was no furniture in that apartment. And the state did get the mom a bed, but they had a crib for the daughter. The daughter was too big to fit in the crib. So they have no furniture, no food, no dishes, no clothing, and just trying to get their lives back on track. Now, I will tell you that that particular young woman has finished her degree in, she's an X-ray technician, and she has moved and her child is in a better school. Her child is autistic. She needed extra help. So we want to be able to help everybody as much as we can, but we can't. We can only just
And it's
do what
very
we
complex
have.
cases. You know,
Yeah.
you're talking
They
about somebody,
really
a
are.
mother with special needs children.
Yes.
And that in and of itself is very difficult. Governor, can you talk a little bit about, the conference is called the Journey of Deliverance, and it's being held on Holy Thursday. Can you talk about perhaps some of the other organizations and groups that are partnering together to try and to participate in this and to come up with solutions?
there are 2 points. One is to go to Beth's point. How do you help a woman extricate herself from a disastrous situation? But then also, in terms of the conference, for women that have acted to protect themselves and in so doing committed a violent act, how do we sort of more equitably balance the scales of justice? How do we have a look back, if you will, at the history of violence, and what should New Jersey be doing on an evidentiary basis so that whether the trial judge at the time of sentencing or in evaluating the woman's choices for prison and alternatives, is there a more rational alternative? So part of what we've done is we've looked at states from across the nation, and what we're doing, what Beth is doing, what we're doing isn't so groundbreaking, but for women that are in this space, this is their lives and this is what they're grappling with. So what we're attempting to say is, from a public policy perspective, the woman she didn't just react to her perpetrator in an isolated unit, that this is a product of sustained violence. And so we need to have that look back. And now how do we do it? I mean, we're careful because, part of the challenge is how to do it in a fair and equitable and responsible way. But that's also the focus. And then what are diversionary programs? What programs, instead of putting that mother away from her children for 7, 12 years, are there diversionary programs where she can continue a relationship with her children, she can continue to be an active part of their lives in a sensible way? And so those challenges, so it's one, moving a potential victim from a bad circumstances, which is, to go to Beth's point, I think very much on target what Beth said. It's the middle of the night, it's the clothes on the back. And so if you're looking at your children and they're laying in bed and you're looking at the row of clothes and you're looking at the refrigerator, and maybe you're looking at this monster, but at the same time, that's almost a Hobbesian choice that's difficult to make. And the second part of it is, for the woman who reacts violently against the perpetrator, how do we have a greater sense of justice and balance in evaluating her crime?
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that on the other side of the break. Stay with us as we continue here on New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. Back in a moment.
Food brings people together. On Cooking with Copel, we combine culinary creativity with good conversation. This spring, we've invited all the candidates for governor to come into the Montclair kitchen, teach me to cook their favorite dish, and give the people of New Jersey a chance to get to know the individuals who would lead our state. It's going to be a fun and exciting way to get really involved in the democratic process. Can't wait to see you there.
Summers in New Jersey were made to wow you. From sun and wows to fun and wows, and every wow in between. So come see what your wow's gonna be. New Jersey. It's one wow after another, after another, after another. You get it. Find your wow at visitnj.org. New Jersey. Little state, lot of wow.
We continue our conversation now with former Governor Jim McGreevey, NJRC Chairman, and Professor Beth Adubato, a featured speaker at the event. Now, Governor Beth, when we last left off, we were talking about women who are often find themselves in prison. They have been victimized for years and years. And what strikes me as they come to a point where they commit a horrific act, but it isn't big.
It's not an isolation. Yes.
There are reasons. And under
Right.
the circumstances, it kind of makes sense if you've been abused and tortured and manipulated. how do you not act out violently, especially if someone you're married to, dating, love, is hurting you, hurting your children? So what can be done? What is being done? What are the things that you're looking at?
Well, I mean, there are two things. One is it's to go to Beth's earlier point. What services are we providing for women when they're leaving state prison? And so I want to just, if I could shout out to Dr. Gloria Bachman for the Institute of Women's Health at RWJ. Gloria, literally, New Jersey Reentry, our medical director, goes up to Edna Mahan on a monthly basis, interviews the woman, talks to the woman, everything from OBGYN concerns to cardiac concerns, and listens to their familial frameworks and how we can help them navigate the return home. So for women that are already in prison, and Laura, just to your point, some of these women have had exemplary lives, but reacting in a moment of violence. And so, I mean, they will say to me, I never thought I'd be in this place. I mean, that this is not who I am. This is not who I was raised to be. This is not the framework. And so dealing with that trauma, I mean, so that's the first point. I don't know if Beth wants to address that, the challenges of coming home from prison.
Right. And even finding themselves there because they have been victimized, brainwashed, meant to think that they are the problem. And then the justice system says, yeah, you are the problem. You're going to jail.
Right. And there are so many misconceptions. I've heard people say, oh, well, women can do this and get away with it. Oh, that is completely not true. The first person I ever interviewed at the prison was given 20 years. Now, let me tell you her story. She was being abused by her husband over and over, and he kept getting out. And then he started going after her daughter. The next time she reported him, she went down to pick him up from the local jail, and she shot him. And then she got 20 years because it was premeditated. So this is a person who is this, tiny little woman sitting there, and she had already served 10 years when I met her, spending all of her time reading about the law, trying to see what she could do. But when a person is going after your child, I mean, this should be taken into consideration. But again, another factor is the women involved tend to have less financial support, and they can't afford a good lawyer. Whereas, when the person has not been killed, or when the man has been accused, they usually do have more money than the women do, and that's another issue.
Because they've been abused, manipulated, probably kept isolated from friends, family, resources.
Right.
So, and if I can, the domestic violence community is extraordinary. I mean, just the partnerships, the
really
coalitions, I mean, they are phenomenal. And I mean, and they are on the ground, boots on the ground, providing services. But to go to Beth's point, it's how do we permit the court to provide this look back? And so that's why we've identified different state legislative programs that would allow the judge to do that. And our argument is, it's not that you're introducing evidence just simply to prove the truth of the matter asserted in the sense, but you're looking at the evidence, you're looking at the pattern of behavior as an opportunity to understand the mens rea, the condition, the place of mind of that woman at the time of the crime. And so we think, I mean, to go to Beth's just point, that's premeditated. Yes, it's premeditated, but it's not premeditated in a vacuum. Right. That individual did not say, I'm going to commit a felonious assault. I'm going to commit a homicide against X, her husband, her boyfriend, her significant other, in an abstraction. But it's because I'm concerned about my daughter's life. Yeah. And so that's what's critically important. And then second, not only how do we look at sentencing, but there's clearly, Laura, a better place than a maximum security prison sentence at Edna Mahan for these women. I mean, when you look at a first-time offender who commits such a violent act, something has to say to you, this just didn't happen capriciously. This is a result of a sustained pattern of abuse.
Beth, do you feel hopeful when you partner with Jim McGreevey, his organization? That
I feel hopeful when I partner with Beth.
Well, but that there are solutions that you're not just you're not just helping people transition back, but how do we also prevent? How do we maybe shore up some laws? Because he's been governor. You've been on the other side of this as well.
Right.
How are your feelings as far as action moving forward? Hope for the future.
I wish I could say that I feel really hopeful. So let's talk about the sexual abuse aspect of it, because they're all present, right? Usually you've got the domestic abuse and you have the sexual abuse, and our laws have been going back and forth. And this is part of the problem too. So I just this morning did just a little take to see what the latest thing is. But the Violence Against Women Act, which was part of the big omnibus crime bill in 1993,
yes.
when we first established a domestic violence hotline. So that was sort of, I think, not frozen, but just put on hold for a while. And now we're looking at a 20% decrease. So we already have these problems, and now you're saying we're going to have fewer resources. So now those of us who are in this kind of nonprofit world, we're going to have to scramble to make sure we fill those gaps. But I think education really is important. I just want to say that there are women who were not incarcerated, who just had to leave in the middle of the night. And every single one I meet apologizes for needing the help. And that's something that we need to work with. We need to take that stigma away. The person who is the victim, it's not your fault that you've been victimized. But people will cry. They'll cry and say, I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to bring my daughter out of that. I didn't want her to have to leave her high school. But I was worried about her
They feel
life.
bad for the action. They feel bad
Yes.
for the inaction. They feel
Yes.
bad for not wanting. How did I get in the position in the first place? And that
Exactly.
it's hard. As you were going to your original point, is you're also having to deal with the mental
Yep.
mindset
Yep.
of coming out of serving a sentence, of coming out of these punitive
And
prices
so
you had
many
to pay.
times, Laura, the children are now in a completely different place. So mom has served a sentence, ostensibly because she was concerned about protecting the lives and welfare of her children, with whom she probably has had minimal interaction. And since that time, the children have been placed either in foster care or in the custody of another individual. And now it's literally the trauma again of having to reestablish a relationship with those children, sometimes after literally decades of imprisonment. So when you think about this sort of in the book of life as a question of fairness and equity, ultimately the mother, and you've had these conversations, and they're painful conversations, the mother says, I made this decision. I was protecting my children, I think, morally and ethically. Yes, I didn't want the result to happen, but I felt like I had no option. Because the point was, she suffered through that violence, sometimes for months and through years. And now, ironically or sadly, she doesn't have that intimate, sort of emotional relationship with her children, and now she has to recalibrate this. So part of this is also saying that we need diversionary programs that maintain the relationship. And people like Senator Teresa Ruiz and people like Chairwoman Ileana Pinto-Marin have been promoting this, that we have to understand why these women are in this predicament. And the irony is they were protecting their children. And how do we maintain that maternal relationship?
Yeah, it seems like a vicious cycle.
Well, it's the irony is that the proximate cause for their action has now been to distance them from the care of their children, which is, almost.
It's hard to get your head
cruel
around
irony.
that.
Yeah,
It really is. Beth, if somebody's watching, what type of message do you have, or as you're delivering remarks at this upcoming conference, what is it that you want to resonate? What are the messages that you want to get out?
I think we have to have education. I think we have to have more public service. I don't know, somehow get messages out there that if you are in this situation, get help sooner. Don't think that you're alone. There are people who can help you. Don't get to the point where you're so desperate. the people who have left before they actually had to commit a crime, those people, you know, they're upset and they're in a bad situation, but at least they're going to be with their families and not have to face prison time.
About 30 seconds left.
Okay.
Beth, if somebody's watching out there and they're in a situation, they don't know what to do, they don't know where to turn to, what would your message be to them?
Well, I would say call the domestic violence hotline, and then that will actually channel you to something that's local. We have 34 different groups in New Jersey alone. As you said, they're all doing a terrific job, and they will help you to find the place that you need to go for help.
And then this conference is coming up on April 17th?
17th.
April 17th, and you go online, find out more information.
Yes, thank you so much.
Governor Jim McGreevey, Beth Adubato, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us on this really important subject and shed light onto something that knows no socioeconomic bounds.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And we thank you for watching. That'll do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thank you so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.
Food brings people together. On Cooking with Copel, we combine culinary creativity with good conversation. This spring, we've invited all the candidates for governor to come into the Montclair kitchen, teach me to cook their favorite dish, and give the people of New Jersey a chance to get to know the individuals who would lead our state. It's going to be a fun and exciting way to get really involved in the democratic process. Can't wait to see you there.
New Jersey, we've got more summer wows under the sun than anyone. So come see what your wow's gonna be in the little state of New Jersey, where it's one wow after another, after another, after another. You get it. Find your wow at visitnj.org. New Jersey, little state, lotta.